Ride. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Blueprint of China. My name is Rennie and I've owned Shuire, a hair extensions brand, for 4 years going on 5. And recently I planned and successfully completed a solo trip to China. Yes, I know, you heard me right. A solo trip to China. It was actually crazy when I first started thinking about it. I had a million reasons as to why it wouldn't work. And honestly, it felt like such a far-fetched idea. It was almost impossible. But I started seeing people traveling to Vietnam for hair and I just thought, why not at least look into it? There are so many different industries in China. There is hair, clothing, shoes, bags, technologies. There had to be someone out there with details that could give me information on this trip and how it would work. So once I had made my mind up that this is something I wanted to do, I started looking for resources or anything to help me actually plan this trip, and I found nothing. And that's exactly why this course was created, to give you a step-by-step plan on how to plan your trip to China for your business. I'll be sharing my experiences with you, how I planned it step by step, the mistakes that I made, things that I would change in the future if I was going again. So during this masterclass / course / series, I'll be going through 2 main parts with you. In episode 1, we will be talking about the preparation for China, understanding your why, your goals, where you're going, how long you're going, what you're going to do when you get there, and what you'll need to make sure your trip is successful. Episode 2 will be for my hair girlies, and it will be focused on how to maximize the trip with your vendors, how to meet vendors, how to plan these appointments, the best way to go about your days to fully maximize them, just how to be completely successful in this trip, as it is a big investment and you want to make sure you're getting out the most from it. So first, we'll be going into episode 1. Get a notebook, get a pen, or an iPad, anything. You just need to take some notes and we'll get right into it. Episode 1 of this masterclass is all about preparing to succeed. Before we can even get into any planning, your first task is to establish your why. Why are you going to China? What's the purpose behind this trip? China's the world's hub for global trade, so there are so many interesting industries. It's so easy to get sidetracked if you're not clear about your priorities. That's why it's really important to define your focus early on so you can stay on track, connect with the right vendors, and most importantly, ensure that you're actually heading to the right city. I'm going to dive into that later on in the episode, but for now, understanding this from the start will save you time, energy, and resources. There are so many reasons why people go to China for business, and some of the most common ones are finding new suppliers to do business with or to get products from, building relationships with suppliers to negotiate better deals or strengthening a long-term partnership. People also attend trade fairs like the Canton Fair to explore new products, discover new trends, and connect with multiple suppliers all in the same place. You can conduct quality checks and make sure that the things you're ordering from your manufacturers align with the standards that you've set for yourselves. You can explore factories and understand the behind the scene processes and firsthand see how your products are being made. Personally, I went to China for a few reasons. I had been running my business, as I said, for 4 years, and one of my main goals was to get a deeper understanding of what was happening behind the scenes in the hair industry. My customers would always ask me detailed questions, and while I could answer to a certain degree, I didn't really have first-hand knowledge, and that was something I really wanted to change, especially with the rise in hair disputes on TikTok and the fights against vendors versus customers. There was just so much lack of transparency in the industry, and I knew there was a growing conversation about where hair comes from, and I wanted to educate myself to make sure that my customers understood this. And I also wanted to actually build a stronger relationship with my vendors. They aren't just suppliers, they're key to your business. They're the ones supplying you with your products. So really having that face-to-face connection helped with negotiating better deals and just having a better relationship with them as someone that I speak to almost every day. The trip wasn't just about business transactions for me. It was about learning, understanding, and bringing clarity to my industry. And that's exactly what I want you to do through this masterclass. So take a moment, pause the video if you need to, and take some time to define your goals. Why are you going to China? What do you want to achieve? Now we're going to be talking about our pre-trip essentials. Where are we going in China? China is massive. It is not like traveling in the UK where you can travel between cities by car or train. There are completely different regions, and a lot of the times you'll need to get a flight from one province to another. During my trip, I decided to visit 2 provinces because I had vendors based in both areas. I didn't actually realize until I started looking for flights that the 2 regions would be a 24-hour car ride away from each other, or a 10-hour train ride, or a 3-hour flight. Of course, I chose the flight. I just didn't have time on my side to spend that long traveling. So definitely keep this in mind when you're planning your trip, especially if you're looking to explore different industries. You might need to face extra travel, time, costs, domestic flights, trains, or a really, really long car journey. Let's talk about how China is organized. So there are provinces, cities, and industrial hubs. Earlier, I mentioned provinces. I didn't actually know what they were until my vendor explained it to me. And I suggest learning how China is geographically structured before planning your trip. It will definitely help. China is much bigger than the UK, so I'm going to use America as an example to explain instead. So China is divided into provinces, similar to America with its states. And each province has cities within them, just like cities are in states in America. And within these cities are districts. So this could be comparable to towns in cities. Let's use New York State as an example. New York is a state in America, but it has multiple cities within that state, and its major city is New York City. And within New York City, there are 5 different boroughs. There's Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island. In the same way in China, you can fly to a province, let's say Guangdong province. I don't even know if I'm saying that right, but you go to Guangdong, and within Guangdong is Guangzhou city. And within Guangzhou are other towns that you need to go into. So just make sure that when you're actually planning these meetings with vendors, you're asking them exactly where they're located. The great thing with China is industries are usually clustered in similar areas. So if you're going for one thing, they will most likely then not be in the same kind of areas with each other. They typically are based close to each other. Also, don't solely rely on what I provide you. Conduct your own research. And if you already have contacts or suppliers, reach out to them and just confirm their location, and make sure that you also confirm that your goal can be achieved at this location. I found that the factories that I wanted to visit were actually in the countryside just because labor is cheaper over there. So when I was going to visit people, they were actually taking me to their offices and not their factories. This of course greatly impacted my goals as I wanted to see the behind the scenes of the factory work with the hair being produced. So please make sure that you're going to the right location. Now we know where we're going, when are we going? The time of year you travel to China is almost as important as where you're going. Factories and suppliers have their own busy periods. They have national holidays and trade fairs that affect how likely they are to be able to meet with you. If you don't plan around these, you could end up arriving when factories are too busy to see you or even closed, and they just can't give you what you need. Chinese New Year is by far the biggest holiday to avoid. It's also known as the Spring Festival. But either way, it is the biggest holiday in China, and it shuts down almost everything. That's factories, offices, and even some logistic companies, and that's for some weeks. They close down and stop completely. I'm talking workers are going home, businesses are closing for at least 2 weeks, sometimes even longer, up to a month really. The dates change every year based on the lunar calendar, but I believe it usually falls within late January, mid-February. I myself traveled in the first week of January for about 10 days. I still think that I was cutting it quite close. When I went there, there were factories that couldn't take visits with me just because they were so busy trying to catch up with orders before they close for the holidays. So I would probably suggest waiting until February is over, and maybe even a little bit of March too, just because when they get back to work, they'll be trying to catch up with all the work that they missed out on, and you don't want to come to them when they don't have resources or time to spare for your visit. Another season that I would suggest to be aware of is trade fair season. So one of the biggest fairs that I mentioned earlier was the Canton Fair, and this happens twice a year in Guangzhou. It covers a huge range of industries. So if you're looking for multiple suppliers, you could really find them in one go. And These are various industries, and this is why trade fairs can be a really great opportunity. They usually occur in spring, and that's between April to May, and then another one in autumn, and that's between October to November. Please check the exact dates on the website though, as they should have them uploaded there for the year you'll be visiting China. And also, they split the industries into phases, I believe 3. So double check that the phase that you're interested in actually also has the industries you're interested in. While it's a great opportunity to explore different industries and meet suppliers face to face in one space, there are a few things to keep in mind. Number 1, it is peak season. That means hotels and flights are way more expensive, so your budget will need to account for this. Number 2, factories will be busier. A lot of suppliers will be attending the trade fair themselves or hosting their other international clients who are also coming for the trade fair. Especially if you're a new customer, they might prioritize their established ones. So it might mean that they have less time for private factory tours or meetings with you. So just make sure you plan in advance if you're planning on visiting during these trade seasons to make sure that you have your appointment booked and locked in. And I would carry on confirming in advance in the lead up to the dates, just because some of them might think you might not turn up and you don't want that to be the case. Just because some of them have multiple visitors trying to schedule in meetings and they could forget or think that you're not turning up if they don't hear from you for a while. Other than Chinese New Year and the trade fair, there are other peak times to watch out for that could also affect your trip. There's the National Golden Week, I believe. I think it's the first week of October, and it's just a week-long public holiday, and travel and business operations usually slow down or even close. Again, check these dates yearly as they can change. There's also Labor Day in May, and that's just another period where factories may slow down or even close down. And finally, we have the Mid-Autumn Festival in about September to October. Again, the dates can vary. It's a much shorter holiday, but some businesses still do take time off, so it's just best to double check and be on the safer side. Great, now we know where we're going and when we're going. It's time to get into booking those flights. And yes, this actually does need to be done before you apply for your visa. If you're anything like me, you'll find that so strange. I was actually so worried that I was going to pay for a non-refundable flight and then find out that my visa got denied, but nothing like that happened, thank God. And I'll get into the visa process a little later on. So when you're booking your flights, I would definitely suggest starting on Skyscanner. It gives you a rough estimate of the price of your flights and the dates that you're thinking about, and it will also give you the timing, so you know how many stops are going to be on those flights and how long it's going to take. So once you search your flights, it should give you different options of providers to book with. I try to book with the airline most of the time, but if there's a big price difference and I trust the third party, I will switch over, because who doesn't like saving a buck? So I think I used trip.com, and I also used the airline for my flights. So I had 2 flights on trip.com, which was a third-party site, and 1 flight with the airline, which was China Southern. Also, another big tip is make sure if you are getting a connecting flight that they are in the same proximity as each other. When I was looking, some airports were actually asking you to go to another airport to connect to your flight, and that just seemed horrible to me. I do not want to be missing a flight in a connecting flight area. It's not pretty. So originally I was looking at connecting flights just because I wanted cheaper flights, but when I actually looked at the pricing, the prices were so similar, it didn't really make sense to get a connecting flight, and I don't regret it. It was definitely worth just doing the straight 13-14 hours all in one go, so I'm sticking with that. I would recommend, however, checking your baggage allowance, especially as I had multiple one-way flights. They changed depending on the airline and the country that I was in. So my flights domestically within China, I was only given 20 kg, whereas when I was coming into China and leaving China, I was given 23 kg. This meant that I had to take a lot of things out of my bag just to try and meet the cutoff in weight. Flights, I barely remember my flight out to Guangzhou. I know it was China Southern and it was one way, but I was just so tired. I slept for most of the flight, and that was a 12-hour flight, I believe. It was, as I said, a direct flight, and it was actually great. But again, I was asleep most of the time, so I don't know if I can be trusted. My second flight was a domestic flight, and that was from Guangzhou to Qingdao. It was 3 hours, and it was a domestic flight, so it was smaller, but it was actually quite comfy. I upgraded when I got to the airport to the premium seats at the front. They weren't first class, they were just behind, but they had so much leg room. It was 100% worth the £20 extra for the upgrade. And then my flight home, That was a struggle. I don't know if it's because I enjoyed the extra leg room on the domestic flight, but Capital Airlines was just really small. I don't actually know if I could recommend it. It was so tight on board. My legs were aching the whole time, just trying to fit in. And also their entertainment systems weren't working, but I don't know if that was the flight or if that is just the airline. I just didn't know where we were at any time, and it was really, really stressing me out. I was checking all the times just to see how long we had been on the flight for and how long it was going to take to reach London, but the system wasn't working. There was nothing. And when I was checking my phone, every time we'd fly over a new country, my phone would change to follow their time zone. So I just had no idea, but we thank God I landed safely. Swiftly moving on from that. Your accommodation really depends on what you decided your trip goals were. It's always best to stay near your appointment so you can save time. So if you're visiting factories, stay close to the district area to save time on travel, especially if you don't have enough days and you're already looking at a tight time zone. Ask for their full address and then ask our bestie, ChatGPT, to give you the distance between the hotel or the apartment you're staying in and your meetings. Another tip that I would give is to also just ask the people you're visiting when you're looking for accommodation. They'll probably know the area better than you. No, they should know the area better than you. And they've probably had guests staying in hotels or apartments in the area that have come to visit them. So they should have some recommendations that they can give you. And then you can go ahead, check booking.com, trip.com, and make sure that you're happy with this. I would strongly recommend considering accommodation with a kitchen. This could be a studio or an apartment. Really, it's your choice, but food was quite difficult for me. It was something I was not at all prepared for. I spent 2 weeks in China craving Chinese. Let me just give you a heads up. I wish I had. The Chinese that we're used to in this Western world is not what is served in China. I will repeat, the Chinese that they are giving us in this Western world, that's America, the UK, Europe, is not the same as what they're eating in China. Our taste palettes are completely different. And so many meals that are so popular here, like egg fried rice, butter fried rice, sweet and sour chicken, they were just unavailable. Instead, it was things like soup, tofu. I think they had hot pot, pigeon was something they served to me, chicken feet. It was just a lot of things that I wasn't used to. And for people who are picky eaters or maybe have sensitive stomachs, I would definitely suggest that you plan for this in advance, because I even struggled with breakfast in some hotels where the options just weren't what I was prepared for. The level of hunger I experienced, honestly, on that trip was, it was a lot. So again, I suggest looking for accommodations with kitchens. That's just my opinion though. If you are a great eater and you like anything, then you're all good. I stayed in 3 different hotels because I was moving between 3 different areas. The first hotel I stayed in was in Mel's Weldon in Human, and it was really close to a lot of clothing factories because Human is a base for a lot of manufacturers. I really liked this hotel. It was a super high tower and my room was absolutely massive. I had my own living space and I also had a beautiful bedroom and then the bathroom toilet area as well. Breakfast was okay, wasn't anything special, but overall I would say that this was a really good stay. Probably the best hotel that I went to out of the 3. Now my second hotel was the Garden Hotel in Guangzhou. This one was in a city, so it was the smallest hotel I stayed in, but it was also the most expensive. Looking back, it was really nice. It had like a mall style feel inside the hotel. There was a cafe, shops, a beautiful garden outside, even though I didn't really get a lot of time to enjoy it just because I was so busy. I do feel like I probably did spend quite a bit on it. But again, because I was in a city, I'm not sure if I would have really found anything much cheaper. So overall, it was really aesthetic and pretty. I didn't get breakfast in this hotel, which I regretted because I was really hungry, but I can't rate that, unfortunately. I will say though, I saw a really long breakfast queue every morning because their breakfast area was smaller and the hotel was just that big. And then my last hotel was Hua Lux in Qingdao. This hotel was beautiful. It was really stunning, but I did have a couple of issues. So my hotel room initially when I went in there, I loved because it was so spacious. And again, it was clean but simple. I really liked it, but the Wi-Fi wasn't working. That was a big problem for me because I ended up having to buy more data because I needed the Wi-Fi for basically everything I was doing. I think I ended up asking them to change my room if there was Wi-Fi working elsewhere because there were so many floors. There were some floors where the Wi-Fi was working on, so I ended up doing that. I didn't love the room that I moved to, even though it was an upgrade. I would say that the initial room I booked was much nicer. So if you are going there, I would stick to the normal rooms. They're stunning. Aside from that, everything was okay. The breakfast, I could not eat though, I'm not going to lie. So yeah, that's the quick rundown of my accommodation in China. If you are planning to visit any of these areas, hopefully this gives you a bit of insight into where you might want to stay. But again, remember what I said last time. It is best to ask your vendors because they should have better insights into the best places for you to stay during your trip. If you have any more questions, just let me know and let's get on to the next thing. Once you've booked your flights, it's time to start the visa process. It was actually a great experience for me. It was a little daunting at first just because I had no idea where to start, and I have like bad history with visas just because of the Nigerian passport office. I'm just going to be so honest. I always just thought it was going to be a fight, but it was not that at all. So a visa is an official document with a stamp in your passport that allows you to enter or stay and leave a country for specific purposes. So it could be tourism, business, studies, there's a lot of reasons. So the visa requirements that you have in the country that you live in could vary from mine. So please do check this specifically for yourself. But based on the UK government, I went onto their website and I also asked ChatGPT for some guidance on what I actually needed to do to apply for this visa. So as a UK citizen, I was staying in China for 10 days and I required a visa. They do offer visa-free transit policy options for travelers from, I think it is 54 countries, including the UK, but this policy is for 10 days and it's only if China is the middle country. So you have to be traveling to another country afterwards. You can't travel from London to China. You have to travel from London to China to Vietnam. It has to be 3 separate countries. So I strongly suggest checking your requirements. You can probably go on your government's page to check this and just make sure you know what kind of visa you need. So there are 2 types of visas you could purchase. There are the business visas, which is also known as the M visa, or there is the tourism visa, which is known as the L visa. So the business visa is for attending meetings, trade fairs, factory visits, supplier appointments, and it usually requires that you get an invitation letter from your supplier or the event that you'll be attending from the organizer. So if you were going to the Canton Fair, once you make an account on their website, it gives you the option to apply for a invitation letter, and then you can print this and give it to the visa office. Your other option is the tourist visa, the L visa. So this is for sightseeing, leisure, basically non-business activities. Personally, I did use a tourist visa, so that is the L visa. I think it's also known as sometimes on the site commercial trade visa. I just did it because it didn't require an invitation letter, and honestly nobody questioned me about it on my trip. So even though business visa is technically more appropriate for the trip that I was taking and probably the trip that you're taking as well, when I asked people and did some research, they also just did the tourist visa just because it was easier and it didn't require any extra paperwork. I'm not gonna lie though, I was worried and I was very paranoid that they would ask me questions and suss me out, but it was nothing like that. I applied for my visa online. I'm based in London, so I'll be speaking about this process specifically from that point of view. You'll need to find your visa center, so the one that's closest to you, and then look at their processes. So I went online to the Chinese Visa Application Service Center site. It is a mouthful. And I followed the instructions. It was asking me what kind of passport I have, when it expires. I think it was also when I was traveling and the purpose of what I was traveling for. This is where you'd enter in a tourist visa or a commercial business visa. It then took me to make an account and I had to fill out a lengthy form. It did take me a while. And you also need to upload a photo, and they have really specific requirements for this photo. I didn't want any issues and it was quite close to my trip, so I went to Snappy Snaps. They were just put online as one of the best people to go to for China visa requirements. They already knew what the requirements were, so they told me what to do. Just make sure you tell them that it's for your Chinese visa application and they should tell you exactly what to do. I bought the digital version and the printed version just because I wasn't sure if I would need both, and it was just in case. It was $19.99, so I just went for it. And you'll also need to provide your flights and your accommodation information when you're applying for the visa. Once you've filled out the whole form, you have to submit it online and then make your way to the visa office in London. The London office doesn't actually take appointments, so it's just a walk-in. And the closest stations were Bank, Cannon Street. It was kind of near Liverpool Street. I went around 10 to 11 a.m. It was so empty. I was actually surprised. It was such a simple process. All I had to do was bring a copy of my passport printed, my passport itself, and also I printed my itinerary. So that included my flight details for all 3 flights. Make sure especially that you have the flight outbound and the flight coming back. And then I also provided my hotel accommodation, and what else? I think that was it. When I walked in, there was a front desk and I had to provide them with my papers and confirm that I had all the itineraries with me and my passport. And then they gave me a ticket, and I was pretty much called almost immediately because, as I said, it was empty. When I sat down, the lady took my papers. Everything was well organized, so I would definitely suggest this. And she literally just checked my passport number against my bookings. She kept my passport, and then she also took my biometrics, which is your fingerprint scan. And then she sent me downstairs to go and pay, and told me to come back in about 4 days, I believe, to collect my passport. I couldn't believe it. It was so quick. But even though it was quick, I would definitely still suggest applying for that visa in time. I would give yourself at least a month in advance, especially if you're going in a peak season, because if you do have to wait, it might take longer, and it might take longer also for them to provide you with your passport. It might not be 4 days like mine. I did have to go back to collect it as well, by the way. The first app that I would 100% recommend is a translator app. The one that I used required me to type in my message, and then it would translate and show them the message. But I think that it's actually better to get the speech ones. So this is where you speak into the app, and then it would translate your message in the other language, and you can just show it to them. And it actually, I think, speaks out to them as well. A lot of people in China actually had that version. So I ended up using a lot of people's translators when they were trying to speak to me. But yes, I would definitely say you need a translator app, especially when you're out exploring, in taxis, in hotels. Actually, even ordering food. KFC, can I just branch off for a second? KFC was amazing, but their branches didn't have any kiosk machines. You had to order through the app, and the app had no translations. It was hard to order food. So I would have to go there and ask someone to help me by using the translator app. Literally tell them my whole order and ask them to order it for me on my phone. It was a whole process. It would take me like an hour to order food. I'm just warning you in advance. Maybe just write out your order and keep it there so you know what's coming, but I definitely needed that. So I would ask vendors just to see if they have a connection that they can give to you, or a suggestion for a VPN that they think is best for you to use. I think that they should be willing to help on that, especially if you already have an established relationship with them. And this brings me on to my favorite purchase, my eSIM. I think it's called Airalo. I was connected to data as soon as I landed. It had inbuilt VPN as well, which kind of connects to my last point. So I would use Wi-Fi and the VPN, but when I was using my data on the eSIM, I'd turn off the VPN because it already had an inbuilt VPN. It was kind of confusing, but I think I spent about £40 on 30 gigabytes of data, which I kind of think is good considering I was on my phone at all times to get me through everything with translation, ordering things, cabs. I was on that phone a lot. And speaking of cabs, the next one was Didi, which I would say is their version of Uber. I've never seen such cheap transportation. I could drive for 15 minutes and only pay £3. I'm just saying, it was amazing. Another app I had was a currency converter, just to track my spending as I was going. Sometimes when you think you know what you're spending, you really don't. Lastly, I know you probably want to know how much I actually spent on this trip. I haven't actually had the heart to look at it yet, but for you, I will. So here it goes. From my first flight from London to Guangzhou, I spent £381. My second flight was Guangzhou to Qingdao. That was domestic in China, and it was £150. And my final flight was Qingdao back to London for £378. I stayed in 3 hotels, and the first one was £250, and this was for 3 nights with breakfast included. My second hotel was £397 for 4 nights with no breakfast, but this was in Guangzhou, which is a pretty popular city, so I was kind of expecting it. My third hotel in Qingdao was £144, and this was for 3 nights with breakfast included. On taxis, like I said, they weren't really expensive. I think I spent about £32, and I had 12 trips when I checked. And this actually includes a ride to the airport. As I explained before, I was surviving on KFC and McDonald's. So on food, I spent £13.64 on KFC, and I ate 3 times. And in McDonald's, I spent £28.51. I'm not sure how many times I ate in McDonald's, but it was definitely more. So Overall, I spent £42.15 on fast food. On my eSIM, I spent £45.80 on 30 gigabytes of data. And then for my visa process, I spent £130 on the application. And I also had to pay £20 for the Snappy Snaps digital and physical print. So that was £150 altogether, for a grand total of £1,993.95 for 10 nights. I don't know if this is bad or not. I think it's pretty good for 10 nights. That's 2K in 10 days. I don't think that's horrible, personally. I knew it was going to be an investment, so it's definitely something I had budgeted for, and I would definitely suggest that it's something that you save for and make sure you plan for properly, because again, you're investing so much time and money, you want to make sure that it is a success. That is the end of episode 1. I hope it really was helpful for you. In episode 2, we'll be preparing you for your trip. In this part, we'll be covering essential packing tips, planning your days, contacting vendors, and how to communicate with your suppliers effectively while you are in China. I really hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that you now know where to start and have a rough idea. Actually, no, I hope you have a detailed idea of what your trip to China is going to look like and how the planning process is set up. It isn't as hard or as daunting as I thought it was going to be. I think it was just not knowing where to start in the beginning that kind of tripped me up. So I really do hope that this gives you a foot up. As always, I am happy to answer any questions you have. Just drop me an email. I will try and add the email to the bottom here. And I just really hope that this was helpful to you. Have a lovely trip. I'm wishing you safe travels, and I pray that God blesses your trip and makes it successful. Amen. Bye.
Ride.